We will start so that we keep our commitment to keep this to 30 minutes. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our session on Agility to Action, a new blueprint for accelerating digital change. As I said, we have 30 minutes and we'd like to keep it to that. Thanks so much for making the time. During this time, basically what we want to do is to share our point of view on how to better drive digital change. And digital change for us is using technology to achieve whatever business goals you have in mind, being more revenue, less cost, better customer experience, better employee experience, or new business models. We're going to divide today's meeting or session in 4 areas. The first one is going to be a quick review of how and why things are not working the way they should today from an operator's perspective. Second, we're going to share our new, simple, humble approach to change that we believe is a game changer in terms of accelerating digital transformations. We will then have an example of how to do it, and then we will have at the end a little bit of time for Q&As. To avoid disruptions, we basically have muted you all, so please add your questions on the Q&A chat or direct questions on the chats, and then we will review them, and at the end of the session we'll get to them. A quick reminder, this is the first webinar we are doing. Later we're going to have new webinars on specific topics that would have deep dives on how to modernize critical functions like sales, HR, supply chain. Today, this webinar is about more generic approach and methodology to digital change. So we start broad, and then in the following webinars, we're going to go deeper on specific functions. So a quick round of intros. I'll be very quick. I'm your host. I'm Jordi Moncada. I'm the CEO of TechTorch. We help companies accelerate their digital journeys. We do that by providing a single software space to simplify and accelerate technological change. We'll talk more about that. Prior to that, I was at Cisco Systems as the SVP of Digital Operations team. And before that, I was a senior partner in the technology practice at Bain. With us, we have Miguel. Miguel and I shared many years at Bain & Company in many different locations around the world. And then about 8 years ago, he left Bain to lead the successful direct-to-consumer transformation at Nike. And at TechTorch, he manages everything related to product and operations. And we have Andy Adams, who is a product manager at TechTorch. She's the brains behind the platform. And prior to that, she was an operations and product leader at Nike. So the current challenges, I guess it's no news to none of us that using technology still remains to be a challenge for a lot of companies. We live in Silicon Valley, some of us, and it's hard to sometimes understand the magnitude, but about 80% of us self-declare not achieving the goals that we set up when we say we want to use technology for those business outcomes. This is not a lack of technological choice. There's a lot of choice out there, more than ever. What we truly believe is that the limited business guidance and context on how to leverage that technology is what actually creates that frustration. It used to be said people, processes, and technology are the 3 elements. We expand the people and processes beyond that to people, information, persona journeys, processes, capabilities. To us, that plus technology equals outcomes, and we'll talk more about it. And what we see from our experience is a lot of people drive digital change with a tech-first mentality. I buy the tools and I try to use the tools, and somehow neglects all the business elements to get to those outcomes. The approach a lot of companies follow based on what we've researched is very much, again, tech first, quite monolithic. We're going to do this whole transformation. We talk a lot about agile, but when you get to the business elements, it's quite waterfall still. Agility is used in some specific elements, developing software and so forth. But when you think about software, overall business transformations, we see a lot of waterfall approach. And then obviously it's very cross-functional by the nature of change. There is a tendency to outsource change to IT and other digital consultancies. Actually, there's a $300 billion business is flourishing out of this tendency. And a lot of medium to small companies feel excluded because they do not want to spend large amounts of money to outsource the technological change. From what we've been talking and surveying, the three critical functions that are undergoing the most pressure to transform technologically is sales, is people, and then supply chain, compounded by all the problems that we're seeing today with inflation, supply chain constraints, and so forth. So that's kind of what we've been listening. And as we talk to customers, basically, 4 key messages arise there that kind of give us the frustrations of companies. The first one is the reality that the vast majority of us want to change. This is real, which gave us a lot of energy, and actually it prompted us to start TechTorch. There's a common sense about really don't know where to start. Again, a lot of people get tech first, bombarded by a lot of vendors, but then they realize, well, we have to step back. And so that kind of, where do I go? How do I start? Is kind of a very strong sentiment. A perception that the change is complex and that is going to be hard. There's so much choice. There's so much things happening in the digital space that some companies shy away because of the perception of complexity. And then the strong belief that no matter what, people want to own the change and they don't want to outsource it. This is too important. It's too close to the business to outsource that. So what is our digital philosophy? Basically, 3 key elements. We all understand the middle one, technology. Sometimes we do not perceive the kind of the depth of the integrations that are requiring configurations, but in a way, I think technology has done a great job at pushing forward. And what we said before, the first element for us is extremely critical, which is all the business elements that we incorporate to this equation. And then outcomes, which is not only the results, but actually understanding what's behind. The metrics, the different levers that you have, the ability to monitor the business outcomes, not just technology KPIs, but the true outcomes from a business perspective, understanding insights, and then the ongoing improvement that you can achieve by, going back and redefining business and technology as you go along. Our 3 pillars are quite simple. The first one is obvious, but sometimes we practitioners forget, which is leverage what others have done successfully. Do not start from scratch. There's a lot of companies out there that were born digitally that have been going through a lot of iterations, so a lot is being solved. And our strong belief is that you should only focus on only you can do. And so let anything else that has been invented be reusable by you. And again, it sounds obvious, but to us, that's a very core pillar of what we do. The second one is we strongly believe there is a good way to drive change, and it doesn't need to be that complicated. And we'll talk more about that. And the third one is we built a platform where you can actually access what others have done and apply this simpler methodology to improve your business. So if we start with the first part, which is the knowledge, there's basically the concept of, sorry, I was moving the slides. The concept of not being monolithic, it's very important. I remember as a consultant, we all had the urgency to paint the picture of the future. What's the future going to look like? With today's pace of innovation and change, it's really hard to actually know what we're going to be looking in 3 years. That doesn't work anymore. So while you might need to set a few rules on how to design the future, we strongly believe that change needs to be broken down and you need to approach change in discrete units. We call this approach one use case at a time. And the use case definition is up to each business. You can define the boundaries of the use case however you want. At TechTorch, what we have is we've defined a long library of proprietary use cases, and we have our own definitions. We believe adjust well how others and best in class have addressed change. And now we have the codification of what really kind of strong companies have done. And so again, you don't have to now start from scratch. So I guess 2 key takeaways here: break down the problem in small chunks so you can address them, and it removes the complexity of thinking holistically. and two, reuse what the best have done. As you think about the methodology, that center pillar, we have 4 key areas. The first one is design the key business elements, and that involves leveraging best practice, as we've discussed, being very customer-centric, not tech-centric, be very business outcomes first, define what we're going to achieve early on, not just as a consequence of, obviously collaborate with the team, and then be modular, as we discussed. The second one is select technology, but also test a lot. So define your architecture, assess tools, simulate, configure, integrate, and so forth. And that's kind of in an iterative cycle. The third one is monitoring the business outcomes. Be paranoid about that. We see a lot of companies that might do 1 and 2, but then they forget about this constant monitoring. Okay, we set Salesforce or a CRM or whatever. Are we really selling more? Is our sellers really productive? And sometimes, what we hear is, well, that's too hard to measure. Data's everywhere. Well, that's important. And we strongly believe in the practice of constant monitoring to understand the levers, to understand the metrics, to generate insights, and then to trigger ways to go to the fourth one, which is this constant improvement, linking the outcomes to your business practices, having this constant improvement mindset, learn, teach everyone, and adapt to what you need. So where do we want to get? Basically, very simple. We believe in terms of our methodology, if you apply it, you're going to go from uncertainty of starting to doing it. We feel that this can be fully owned. Breaking that problem removes complexity, and it helps to just feel that I own these specific areas of changes. Do leverage information that exists. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of things that we have mapped and that can be mapped. You can reuse that. And the last thing is to keep it simple and to make it accessible. The third area that we were talking about is the platform that brings it all together. Basically, here we've created a platform where literally you can leverage the first pillar, the best practices, and then apply this methodology of change, of being business outcome centric, finding your technology, monitoring the business outcomes, and then redoing it in an agile fashion. It's a very simple environment to design all this. It's an environment where you can collaborate for your teams. So PowerPoints and Excels and everything else goes out of the window. You're in one place in a single environment, very simple to work together. We have a lot of libraries of content that we've been codifying. You can access the technologies in this space and you can test them. So again, you don't have to go and ask either consultants or a specialist in technologies. You as a business owner can test the different technologies and say, I like A better than B because I've been using it for the last 2 weeks and I like it, and I've been simulating scenarios in the TechTorch environment. Hence, I'm going to go with A. When I tested B, I didn't like it that much. And lastly, a very simple environment where you can monitor the business outcomes. Tools, technology is very good at giving us specific KPIs and things, but the lack of bringing it all together into business dashboards is what we're missing. And that's what at TechTorch we have built, the ability to think business, monitor business, and then react and get insights. So with that in mind, what we'll do now is go to the example. So we'll do a quick view of how this looks like in action. I'm gonna take you to TechTorch. So this is our platform. As I said, we have a lot of libraries codified where you can actually browse different use cases. And those use cases basically give you a lot of information about the how others have done this and what are the best practices. So if you go to TechTorch today, you'll see a bunch of use cases on sales, a lot of use cases on people or HR, a lot of use cases on supply chain. We're gonna just take one today in terms of, as an example, something that I think we all kind of understand quite well, which is talent acquisition. So put yourself in the situation of a company that is under a lot of pressure to grow and acquire a lot of talent, recruit a lot of talent. I will use this as an example, not because I want to talk about talent acquisition, just because it's an easy example. And again, later on other webinars, we can do deep dives on people, on other topics. So first, what we do when you start a use case is basically understand whether there's best practices. In this case, yes, there's a lot documented in talent acquisition. And then what we help you do through this platform is actually put in place the different business elements that you require in order to achieve a good outcome out of bringing technology to talent acquisition. The first thing you would do is set up a set of outcomes. These are examples. You can obviously edit these and change them to what specific needs. It might be that for you, specific elements of remote working matters a lot, so you might want to monitor that, or specific elements of diversity, specific things. So you can add, delete, but this is basically a set of outcomes. Then you walk through what capabilities you got to build in order to get to those specific outcomes. In this case, there's a part of strategy, a lot of branding about candidate, selection, how you do selection, how do you select the application, how do you manage the application through the processes. And then we provide a bunch of resources on, other people, have they done it, you can read and all that stuff. And again, this is all configurable. As part of business, we understand there's a lot of decisions you got to make. So what TechTorch offers you is ability to actually create your own a decision tracker. So you can write your decisions. We have codified a few, and then take the decisions and understand who made the decisions when, so that you actually don't get caught up in, did we decide this or not? As I said, we're a very strong believer on customer first centricity. So in this case, user journey centricity. We have the ability to create user journeys. Here you have an example of a user journey for an applicant in a company. You can have the user journey of an HR manager and so forth. Processes, we all kind of get the essence of processes. So it's important to actually understand how the processes are built and how are they linked together. So you can have processes for recruitment, and you can see that, but then in the middle, you realize there's something very important, which is job descriptions. So you actually go there because they're all linked. All the processes that we have are linked. Say, okay, this is the process for a job description. You need to develop an employee brand. So you keep going and you can go there and so forth. So basically the processes, again, we have a baseline codified for you, and then you can move, change, and edit all this as much as you want. Same thing goes for stakeholders. We all understand the change management aspect, so you can basically list all the people that need to be involved, what are the responsibilities, and you can just keep going on that area. So once you have defined the business elements, then we move to the system architecture or the technology space. You still could and are someone that might not be, very involved in technology, but what we provide is the conceptual elements of a system architecture. In order for you to build a great recruiting engine, you might want to consider these 6 different pieces of architecture. You might want to have some HCM tool in talent acquisition. You might want to have some job boards, career pages, an applicant tracking system, screening for candidates, an interviewing tool. It's obviously up to you to decide which of these elements work and you need. You might say, actually, I do not require career pages because I have my own web page and it's good enough. So then you say, I don't need that. But you might say, I do need sourcing. And today, I might be using LinkedIn, but that's not being very effective because I need a specific, I want to be in the technology space, and Monster seems to be doing a better job. So you just, basically select the different tools that you want to use. In terms of ATS, you say, okay, we've been doing it in-house, managing this from an Excel perspective, but what about if we test one of these ATS? So TechTorch, based on who you are, on how big, how small, what vertical, we recommend you a set of tools, but we're technology neutral in the sense that, it's up to you to decide which ones you want to use. So let's say in this case, you use Breezy HR. And so you can fill this in or just basically say, I don't need this. You can say no need, or you can literally remove it. And so basically at this point, you can say, okay, now I've defined my architecture. I think I need these three things. I need a strong job board. I need an application tracking system so that my people are not tracking things and scheduling. And then I might need an interviewing tool that works for me. The next step then is actually going to the simulation. So the idea at this point is that once you've defined your architecture, you have a safe space within TechTorch where you can see whether these tools are the ones that you like. So instead of calling the vendors, of actually being, having to Google your way through that, you can literally start a simulation so that all these elements are being, you can test it from a business perspective. We do the integrations behind the scenes, and then you just go to the simulate space, and then you basically go to your different sets. And I'm going to use the opportunity to give pass the ball, as we used to say, to Andy, who's going to see this from her perspective as a user of TechTorch.
Hey guys, so I'll take over here. So for the consideration of coming into an ATS platform, so we saw one of our outcomes is really around increasing our efficiency around our recruiting processes. So I've sort of set up an example job here of what would be configured for testing that workflow around the interview processes. So we're hiring for a retail technical support specialist. I'm trying out Breezy as a platform. So I'm looking for the ability to parse resumes. I'm looking for ease around scheduling interviews. So we've got Tom Adams here, no relation to me, Andrea Adams. But okay, so we've pulled it up here. I'm liking his experience. It seems relevant for the support specialist. So I want to move him forward. So I'm checking out these workflows. All right, how does that look when I've moved him onto interviewing? Didn't go. Let's see if we change him to interviewing. Okay, well, it's not liking that. But okay, now I want to schedule an interview with him. So we're sort of testing out some of this functionality. What are the plugins that I have here? Okay, I can add a video conference. I can add an interview guide. Okay, we're using MS Teams. So we can start to add in test some of these functionality. And so thinking about that, we want to say, how are we progressing against our outcomes for our talent acquisition? So we're going back into our use case and we're moving into our monitoring section. So it's pulling in this data from our ATS to say, hey, how are we going? Looking at the trends relative to our talent acquisition processes, I'm seeing that, we're really struggling in this workplace diversity. We're expanding rapidly, but we're not reaching sort of our representation targets that we have within our company. So within, company X, we're thinking about how do we, integrate that? So we're going back to our critical decisions. And as a company, we want to collaborate on what would be some of those things. So for us, it might be, hey, should we actually, introduce a diversity and inclusion department? And we can start to add in yes, no, what would that entail? We can start to have conversations internally about what that would be. I won't make you watch me type. Okay, then what does that mean at a user journey or a process flow, or even from a stakeholder's perspective? So we realize, hey, we might actually want to even add, I sort of pre-populated it here, a program manager who's actually going to look at our DE&I strategy across those elements. So you can start to see how you consider taking from monitoring and then layering those considerations into something like a talent acquisition activity. I'm going to review our process flows again. Okay, we need to incorporate DE&I throughout here. So I'll pause there. Maybe I'll hand it back to Jordi.
Thank you. That's great. So again, guys, we've been going quickly just because of time, but a lot more to come. I guess I got a couple of questions. I saw Miguel being active answering some of the questions on the chat. one of the questions I got directly was, how do we choose these technologies? How do we become neutral, and how do we make sure that it's specific to its needs? Basically, at TechTorch, if you want to, you self-identify yourself, meaning you join an organization and you tell us, who you are and how many employees you have and what vertical. And then as we've been building the library of technologies for each use case, we've been actually tagging them, what's most appropriate for what. We have a team that's doing that, and obviously with a lot of research. And what we do is then direct you to the right technology based on your needs. The second question I got was whether this is just for greenfield scenarios or it can be used for, brownfield. Absolutely both. Easier no matter what you use to do greenfield and brownfield, but there's so many companies out there that just need to improve upon some of the systems. And so basically what we work with companies is to map their processes, and you can map it yourself, and you can do that in the way that Andy was showing. And then you basically can choose which technologies to change specifically and leave the rest the way you have them, because you might have some deep entrenched technologies that you're not wanting to change because they have longer life cycles. Think about ERPs or long-standing HCMs or your own tools that you've developed over the years. So absolutely, we have a kind of a good appreciation for the fact that a lot of technology is already there, and there's a lot of brownfield that needs to be achieved. Want to keep on my promise, so I want to thank you all for attending. Hopefully you've learned something new today. Please, for more information, we have a webpage. Do join our platform. It's free. We welcome everyone. You can test it. You actually, the use case we're reviewing today is out there for you to use. We will have new webinars on sales, people, and supply chain modernization coming very soon. And anything you need, these are our emails, and I know a lot of you, so feel free to call us, email us, and we're here to help.